Police department. Huh?
There are quite a few things that I've been addressing as of late that have off a lot of people. But if I'm sitting in Vegas with my poker chips and I got to put them on a number, I got to put them all on a topic, it's Ukraine. That's what brought those people to my house last night. That's why there was an attempt upon my life last night. That's why there was an attempt to do me and my wife great harm last night. And it's because somebody doesn't like what I have to say regarding that war. So if it was your intent to get me to be silent on an issue, you have failed. That will not be my response. Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton, and today is a very special, or rather I should say a very important episode of Ideas Have Consequences, and that is because about 12 hours ago, my home was swatted in the middle of the night. Now, if you don't know what that term means, SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics Units. It makes it's a reference to kind of special police that would show up in very dire circumstances like hostage situations or shootings or things of this nature. And apparently someone who doesn't like me, who doesn't like my particular commentary on this or that subject, decided that they would subject my wife and myself to this form of terrorism. And that's really what it is. Now, this kind of thing is happening to conservative commentators across the country, and I am now the latest target of this. I have heard from Gunther Eagleman, from Insurrection Barbie, from other people who are telling me, if not their own stories, and the stories of other conservative commentators. And by the way, it's all conservative commentators who are being subjected to this. And I want to be very clear about this from the very beginning. I don't care if you're Anderson Cooper. I don't care if you're AOC. I don't care if you're Nancy Pelosi. I do not want to see this happen to you. I do not want to see law enforcement weaponized against you and your family in an effort to terrorize you and potentially kill you. And that's what this was all about. And this is what happened to me and to my wife last night. Now, I had planned on talking about something that was entirely different today. I have been very involved in the discussions that are taking place regarding the Joe Rogan interview of the faux historian, Daryl Cooper. The Steve Deese show reached out to me and asked me if I would be willing to debate him. I answered eagerly. I said, yes, I would be more than happy to debate a guy that I believe is he's maybe not exactly a Holocaust denier. He's a Holocaust revisionist. He just kind of nibbles at the edges and then hides behind the defense and says, well, I'm just asking questions. That's all that I'm doing. That, of course, is what Satan did in the Garden of Eden. Did the Lord really tell you that? I mean, that's kind of what they're doing. But no surprise to me, Daryl Cooper did not agree to debate me. And but I was going to talk about, the things that are coming on the heels of that. Other people, their commentary, and the way that they're processing and understanding this issue. But nope. That's not what I'm talking about today. And by the way, I was also going to talk to you about what really is going on at USAID Cairo, a place where the Egyptian secret police recently tried to disappear me. I mean, my life has been nothing but exciting, as of late. I mean, so far this year, I've been to the World Economic Forum and sat amongst a bunch of billionaire fascist globalists. I hung out with some very dear friends in a quaint Swiss alpine town. I climbed the Great Pyramid of Giza. I have had another grandchild join our family. I have been Um, in South America, seeing some awful things, child trafficking, human trafficking, these kinds of things, nearly getting killed in Cairo. And now my home has been swatted. And that's just in the first 2.5 months of this year. So who knows what the rest of 2025 has in store for me. But this issue matters. And the people who are doing this, they deserve to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. They deserve to be sent to jail for a very long time. So what happened? Well, we're going to be showing you the images from my own home security cameras that will show you part of what takes place here. These images will roll as I'm speaking to you, but I was headed to bed late last night. I'm a guy who doesn't sleep particularly well. I'm up a lot during the night with pain issues. And Ranger, who some of you will know, my German Shepherd, he's got a bit of a fan base of his own. And a Ranger is, I got him at a police kennel when he was a pup. His mom and his dad, they were both champion police dogs. And when he was maybe 1.5 or 2 years old, I took him for training to be trained as a protection dog. And I recall the trainer saying to me after examining him for a couple of hours, he came back and he said, "I can take your money, but I'm just going to tell you that it's in the DNA of this dog." He says most German Shepherds, it is. He said they're going to be friendly to whoever you're friendly to, and they're going to be hostile to whoever you're hostile to, wary of people that you're wary of. But he said, "Look, I don't really feel good about taking your money because I can tell you right now that if I make an aggressive move towards you, that dog is going to kill me." He said, "So don't think that's necessary." And Ranger fits into this story because last night, as I'm going to bed, I don't know, maybe 1 a.m., I'm up and I'm giving him some medication because, as some of you will know, I've been gone for a couple of months, and Ranger, I don't think the word is anxiety. He kind of goes into a depression when I'm gone, and he lost a lot of weight while I was absent, and he began chewing hot spots, all into himself. So I've been giving him, the veterinarian prescribed antibiotic for him, and I'm giving it to him, and he has to take it with food, and I'm trying to give him this medication with food, and Ranger, his ears are up in what I call Batman mode, where they're kind of moving around and turning and, like radar taking in various noises that I can't hear. And the fur on his shoulders is up like a razorback. He's kind of bowed up. And I have learned with Ranger's my 6th German Shepherd. I love the breed, and he's the smartest of the lot. I loved them all, but he is the smartest of the lot. And I have learned to be very sensitive to his moods because there's a reason for his behavior. Now, in this particular occasion, I didn't know that there were 5 heavily armed men with body armor, then silently, under the cover of darkness, approaching my home. What I thought was that I must have a rodent. Ranger must be hearing a mouse or a rat or something. We had a cold snap. Maybe one of them managed to get into the house. But his ears are up in Batman mode, turning radar-like, and his nose is in the air. And this is long before these men had even reached my deck. And after a few minutes, I decide to go to bed. And I go and I get into bed, and which is, in the back of the house. And I notice that Ranger, who sleeps at the foot of the bed, he's still up. He's in the bedroom. He's still up, and the ears are still up, and the hair, the fur on the back of his shoulders is still on end. And I thought, boy, something has him pretty fired up. And sometimes that means he can hear, say, something like an armadillo or a deer, or something like that outside. And at that very moment, I see a flash of light off of my bedroom door, which was open. And I live in a very remote area. There are no cars that would come through where you would see headlights flashing or something like that, the way you might in a city. Nothing like that. And again, I'm thinking to myself, I didn't totally trust my instincts, but I trusted Rangers because it was peripheral. Did I just see a flash of light? And Ranger, this time, he's going to investigate. And I thought, something's there. And then I see another flash of light. So I get my weapon. Now, I live in the American South. Some of you who don't live in the South or live in other countries, this is entirely foreign to you. Let me explain to you that in the American South and in the Midwest part of this country, weapons are very common in homes. And I grew up with them where, my dad had a gun rack. My southern, not my Canadian one, but my southern grandfather, he probably had 10 gun racks in his house because he collected them, with shotguns and rifles and these kinds of things. And I grew up in the military, meaning that we were taught to use firearms when we were very, very young. I probably learned to do that about the same time I was learning to swim or riding a bicycle. That was just the way things were in my home. So there's nothing strange about me having a weapon near my bed. And so I draw my weapon, which is loaded, and I go out. I don't know if you can see me, but hopefully, but I am going out with my firearm at low ready. I can't really quite do it here because of the table, but I have my firearm at low ready, and I am coming out of the bedroom. Ranger is already charged out of the bedroom to investigate, and he is now barking like mad because he has already seen something that I haven't seen. But as I'm coming around the corner of my bedroom, I can see out on my deck a silhouette of men. Now, you'll begin to see these images right here. Now, it looks like these men are well lit. They're not well lit. That's the nature of these cameras, infrared. They're able to capture these kinds of images. They're in almost total darkness on my deck. And so all I can see, this is a dog trot that runs not quite, but almost through the center of my home, separating, the guest quarters from the main part of the house. And I can see the silhouette of a man with an automatic rifle. I cannot see a uniform. I just see a man tiptoeing on my porch. So this is critical to understanding what happened to my home, to me, and to my wife last night. These were not police cars arriving with sirens and with their lights, in which case I would have gone outside unarmed and would have said, "Hey, what's going on? Can I help you? Why are you guys here?" No, these guys approached, as they would later tell me, they had approached blacked out. And the reason they came like that, I don't fault them for it. The reason they came like that is because they would tell me they had received a call from someone I will almost guarantee you was overseas, someone who claimed to be inside my home hiding. And again, the details here, because I have not heard the 911 audio, and I have to file an affidavit and so forth in order to get it, and I will do so. But as yet, I do not have the full details. What I was told is that the person claimed to be inside my home hiding, that, quote, there was blood everywhere, and that there were 3 men in hoodies with firearms going around the house shooting everybody. So these guys, what they told me they did was they didn't come down my driveway. They parked some distance from my driveway, and they didn't come with sirens. They did not come with their lights. They came down the driveway, 5 of them, 9 cars parked at the top of the driveway, emergency vehicles. They come down my driveway under the cover of darkness with and you can see them in these images. You can see them occasionally pointing their automatic rifles, appear to be AR-15s, into my home. And I am inside in the darkness around a corner with my gun, and I can see them. At least, let me rephrase that. I could see one of them, eventually two of them, and then eventually a third, but I could not see uniforms. So I could just see silhouettes, and I could see that they were heavily armed. So you can see how this situation could go sideways very quickly. So I then turn on a light, and you'll see that in one of these videos here where the light comes on. And this particular police officer, he wisely, and I'll tell you more about him in a moment, he wisely says, police, police. But I still can't see uniforms. Now, again, the cameras, because they're infrared, they give you the impression that they're very, well lit. Me on the inside of the house, I can see, the outlines of people there. I cannot see their faces. I cannot see who they are. So I am still holding my weapon at low ready. And the key word there is ready. I am ready to open fire and protect my home if need be. And, of course, they're ready to return fire because they've been told, that somebody inside is killing everybody. Think about this. So this is happening in the middle of the night. I think I've captured for you here. I have the timestamp on here. So this is after 1 a.m. in the morning that these guys come to my house. And when I tell them to identify themselves, one of them, I don't know if you see it on here or not, but one of them illuminates himself. I don't know if he shined a light from his waist upward or if he held it up over his head and shined it down, but he illuminated himself, and suddenly I could see a uniform. I could see that this was somebody at least in a police uniform, whether or not he was actually a police officer. And I want to stress to you that the background of what just recently happened to me with USAID in Cairo, I'm on edge just a bit because they say they're police. I can see a uniform. Anybody can get that. This could just be a play to get me to put down my weapon. So they eventually begin to identify themselves a little bit more clearly. The police officer, the lead one who is speaking to me, he comes to the door where I can really get a good look at him. And I did let him in. I told the others they had to stay outside, but I would let him in. And then he began to speak, and it de-escalated from there. And I really do want to congratulate him because he was very level-headed. I want to congratulate everybody involved, actually, because I want to be clear here. Based on what I know, there's no reason to to trash these officers. I promise you there's not a Biden voter among them, not a Kamala Harris voter among any of these guys. They were responding to a situation where they were told there were active shooters and that people were dead and, quote, blood everywhere. So that's the reason they came blacked out. But from my perspective, if police come and they have their siren on, they have their lights on, I'm not armed, right? I wouldn't be armed. But when I look out from my bedroom down a long corridor and I see the silhouettes of armed men tiptoeing on my porch who have yet to identify themselves as anything, I'm this close to opening fire. And you'll see in one of these videos where one of them tries the door. And thank God, by the way, that the door was locked. Because if he had opened that door without identifying himself and I had come out of the bedroom, I'm standing in the doorway of my bedroom, kind of partially hidden. And he comes into my house, and I see a man with an automatic rifle standing in my living room. I'm not asking questions. I'm opening fire. Thank God that door was locked. And you can hear some of his commentary here. Listen to what he says.
It's really none of my business. But it don't look like there's been 3 or 4 guys in here who's shot everybody.
So this clues you in that these guys are pretty sensible. He's telling you, I don't know if you could really hear him there, but he says, maybe this is none of my business. And actually it was, his business because his life could be on the line here. But he says, this doesn't look like a scenario where people are getting shot. I don't really think that's what's going on here. And the other guys are having their own doubts. They would tell me later. Now, again, I want to stress this is the America South. So the officer in charge, the one that says police, and who I allow into the house, he never asked me to put my weapon down. And later when I was talking to him, I said, what was your reaction? What happened when you were coming here? And he said, well, we got the call. And he said, I look at neighborhoods, and I saw where this call, is said to have originated from. And I thought, we've never had an incident out there. I never had one out there. He said, so that made me have some doubt. He said, and then we get there and the gate is locked. That just added more doubt. He said, we get there and the house is completely blacked out. He said, but when you came out, I'm in my boxer shorts, I'm barefooted, wearing a T-shirt. And he said, it didn't alarm me especially that you had a gun. And he said, because I thought to myself, first of all, I'm from here. Everybody has a gun. And secondly, I thought to myself, I would have a gun if strange men are standing on my porch armed. He said, so I didn't think that, you having a gun was unreasonable. And I didn't think you were about to start shooting us. He said, so at that point, he says, basically he realized now really all I need to do is to convince him that we're not intruders, hell-bent on doing him or his family or his dog harm. And so we you will see from a photo right here, everybody's smiling, everybody's laughing. And so this ended very well. And again, I want to stress that based on what I know, I commend these police officers. If these are a bunch of hotheads, they maybe just start opening fire on me in my house. I mean, again, they're pointing automatic rifles into my home, and that could have easily happened. I want to stress here that trigger discipline, finger discipline, it matters. And in this case, it was on both sides. I was cool-headed. Not my first rodeo with this kind of thing. I mean, what just happened in Cairo, and not theirs either. And so the result of this was that it ended well. Is it always going to end well? No. This was an act of terrorism, and not on the part of the police, on the part of the sheriff's department. It's an act of terrorism on the part of the person who made what you're inclined to call a prank call, but prank call makes it sound whimsical, makes it sound like it was fun. It was funny. We used to do that when we were kids. We just call random numbers and people would answer, and we say stupid things that kids say, and then hang up, and then we would giggle, not having any idea, who we'd called. And that's not what this was. This was an act of terrorism, because the person who did this, they were, at the very least, they were willing to do something. They wanted to do something to terrorize me and my wife. I don't think they achieved that. I don't think my wife ever felt especially afraid, and neither did I. But I did think that this was probably going to result in gunplay, at least, at the very beginning of this. And at the worst, whoever did this, this was attempted murder, meaning whoever did it, they were okay with an outcome where there's carnage here, where police officers get shot, where my wife and I get shot. They're okay with that. Doesn't bother them. So it's more than just a waste of my tax dollars and yours, of police department, sheriff department resources. This is an act of terrorism. And the person or persons who are responsible for doing these things, I want revenge on these people. I want justice served for this, because this is an evil, evil act. Tell you a little bit of a funny story as it relates to this. I've been back in the United States, a week, 10 days, whatever it is. And I took Lori out for dinner last night. And she says to me, your work overseas is so dangerous. Maybe it's time to chill just a little bit. And I said, well, kind of somewhat defensively and trying to make her feel better about everything, I said, well, Lori, and I kind of point around the restroom. We weren't sitting in a restroom. We were not dining in a restroom. I point around the restaurant. We're sitting in a sports grill. I said, but look, I come home after these kinds of things happen, dangerous things, as you rightly call them. Not all of them, some of them. And I come back here where almost nobody in here really knows what I do for a living, or me. It's just absolutely, literally foreign for them. And my life is pretty boring here. And by the time I come home, I'm ready for boring. We just go to our home and enjoy the peace and solitude of rural Alabama. I mean, what could be better, dear? It's peaceful. Nothing to worry about. Boring. And not too many hours after that, 5 heavily armed men show up at my home, are tiptoeing around on my porches, and I am this close to opening fire. You see, part of what goes through your head in a situation like that, so that you will understand, if you don't know anything about firearms, I am armed on this particular occasion. I also have semi-automatic rifles. But at this particular moment, and shotgun, for home defense, a shotgun, honestly, in my opinion, is much better than an AR-15 because you don't have to be perfectly accurate with it to hit somebody. And it's perfect at close range. But anyway, you people have their own preferences when it comes to these kinds of things. On this occasion, I have a Glock 19, 9mm. And not the best weapon when you're facing 5 men with semi-automatic rifles. Again, AR-15s that they're carrying. They can get a lot more lead in the air than I can. I'm not going to win any kind of gun battle here. But the scenarios that are running through your head when you see 5 men on your deck who have not identified themselves as yet as police. All you see are silhouettes of men who are tiptoeing with their rifles and who appear to be hell-bent on doing harm, as you're thinking, these are people who are here to kill me. And I want to try to get 1 or 2 of them before I go down. Because I am going to go down in this kind of scenario. They have far more firepower than I have. And but I decide to turn on a light. Unfortunately, where I was standing in the house, I could not turn on the deck light, which is what I would prefer to have done, is turn on the deck light where I can see them, but they can't see me. Instead, I turned on the interior light, which shed a tiny bit of light on them, but mostly so that they could see me. And I did not hide the weapon. I wanted the weapon to be visible. And fortunately, things de-escalated from there. But these things are happening to conservative commentators around the country. I'm not the first one, and undoubtedly I will not be the last one. Now, an obvious question arises, what is it that you've said that has upset people? Well, I've said quite a few things that have upset a lot of people. As I mentioned, I've gone after the Nazi sympathizer, Daryl Cooper. I have been very critical. I've been very supportive, first of all, of President Trump's attempts to bring peace to the war between Russia and Ukraine. But I've been incredibly critical of Ukraine because Ukraine is an incredibly corrupt country. I've been very critical of Russia because it is, just like Ukraine, incredibly corrupt. And I have been hot on the trail of USAID. And when I eventually, it just seems like I'm never going to have the chance to tell you guys all that's going on regarding USAID and what was really taking place when I was there in Cairo. But suffice it to say, that was very dangerous for a reason, and that's because USAID has an awful lot to hide. USAID Cairo has a ton to hide. Not so much USAID, in South America. They do, I mean, at their offices there. They have a lot to hide there because they were involved in human trafficking. But I mean, if you went to a USAID office, what happened to me in Cairo would not happen to me there. What's going on in Cairo is related to what's going on in Gaza, is what's related to what's going on with Hamas. And I will eventually come back to that. Point is, there are quite a few things that I've been addressing as of late that have pissed off a lot of people. But if I'm sitting in Vegas with my poker chips and I got to put them on a number, I got to put them all on a topic, it's Ukraine. That's what brought those people to my house last night. That's why there was an attempt upon my life last night. That's why there was an attempt to do me and my wife great harm last night. And it's because somebody doesn't like what I have to say regarding that war. Now, I did an interview this morning with one of the state newspapers. I did a couple of them this morning, and the woman who was interviewing me, she asked me this question. She said, does this frighten you? Does this make you, back off and maybe decide, what, I'm not going to say any more on that issue? Absolutely not. It tells me that I am over the target. So if it was your intent to get me to be silent on an issue, you have failed. That will not be my response. My wife would tell you I'm a contrarian, meaning the more you not want me to do something is probably means it's the more I'm going to do it. But it's just confirmation to me. I'm hitting some buttons. I'm hitting the sensitive areas. I'm over the target. I got to keep pressing on. That's what it tells me. And ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, I have said this, but it's worth repeating. I believe President Trump is currently facing the biggest challenge of any president since Abraham Lincoln. And that is because that includes world wars. That includes Vietnam. That includes Korea. That includes the Cold War. And that is because those presidents, with the exception of Lincoln, all our previous presidents had a united country, essentially. Trump has not only a divided country, but he has a divided government. And he is trying to gain control of his government by putting his people in place and slowly rooting out the corrupt elements and getting rid of those people. But he's not there yet. And that's going to take a long time in order to achieve that. It is going to take a long time. Please be patient with the Department of Justice. Please be patient with the things that they're trying to do in the military. Please be patient with the border. Please be patient with foreign policy, domestic policy, all that stuff, because he has a deep state that is deeply entrenched throughout the bureaucracy, the considerable bureaucracy of the United States government. And those elements are incredibly corrupt. I mean, incredibly corrupt. And the more cornered they are, the more desperate they become, and the more they're willing to do, not that they weren't before, but the more willing they are to do absolutely anything, from being exposed, from preventing or keeping, rather, the money train, the gravy train rolling, and to prevent themselves from going to jail and facing public scrutiny embarrassment, annihilation of reputations. They are running scared. And the result of that is they're doing things like what they did to me last night. Let's just create a highly combustible atmosphere where a guy is in his home in the middle of the night, and that's when the person waited to make this call. They didn't do it in the middle of the day. They waited to do it in the middle of the night, not knowing perhaps that I would actually still be up. Let's do it in the middle of the night. A guy who probably owns a gun, and police who will definitely arrive with guns, and let's tell them a story that's so bad that those guys will think they have to show up blacked out, that they have to show up heavily armed and sneaking around the house. Let's create this combustible atmosphere and hope that one fires on the other. And then once that happens, who knows how many people get killed? If we're lucky, maybe they all kill each other. That's what was going on here, ladies and gentlemen. That is incredibly important for you to understand. Now, thankfully, that didn't happen. And again, it didn't happen because of discipline on both sides, cool heads on both sides. It's a good thing I'm really not a drinking man. I posted a story yesterday about, really one that sort of tells a story on me about how little I know about alcohol. And this is worth telling right here. Some years ago, I was on the Alabama-Florida line, on the Alabama side, on vacation at the beach with my family. And I get a text from a friend, and he says, "Can you pick me up some DEWAR' scotch, 2 cases in Florida? Drive across the Florida line and get it there because it's cheaper there." I was like, okay. So I drive across the state line. And again, not being a drinking man, I did not know how I'd never heard of this scotch before. I heard of Johnny Walker. That pretty well is it for me. So I didn't know what this stuff was. And so I walk into the liquor store and I said, "Do you have any de-escalation?" Some of you are laughing now. And the person said, "No, I never heard of it." And I was like, well, dang. So I drive on to the next liquor store. I'm getting deeper into Florida as I go. I go to the next liquor store and I said, "Do you have any de-escalation?" "Nah, never heard of it. Must be a specialty drink." Anyway, I go to a couple more, and then I'm at the last liquor store I'm going to go to. And I asked this woman, I come in and I say, "Do you have any de-escalation?" She said, "That's a new one on me. I've never heard of it." She said, "What is it?" And I said, "Apparently it's a scotch." And a look came over her face of recognition. Her eyes got big, and she laughed. I mean, like ripples of laughter went from head to toe. And she said, "You mean doers? Doers." She said, "Honey, when a man comes in and asks for 2 cases of scotch, I just assume he's an alcoholic. But not you, because I don't know who this is for, but I know it's not for you. It's called doers. Doers." But, I'm looking at it, phonetically. The point I'm trying to make here is, imagine last night I had myself a lot of doers. I'd had some Jack Daniels. I've heard of that one. What happens in a situation like that? What happens if I don't have a cool head? What happens if one of them is a little bit trigger happy? What happens if one of them is a little intoxicated? What happens if one of them is a Democrat? You see how this whole thing could have played out very, very differently. And I want to say this on behalf of all of the conservatives that this has been done to. It goes to show you how evil our opponents are. They claim to be for democracy. They're not for democracy. They claim to be for justice. They're not for justice. They claim to be for the people. They're not for the people. They claim to be all these things, but you see, at the end of the day, the only thing they're about is power. They're about the preservation of power. They're about taking your money and using it however they want to. They have no regard for a democratic process. They have no regard for the rule of law, and thus no regard for our Constitution. And they don't care who they hurt. If it had been me, my wife, my dog, anybody else who'd been in my house, what if Lawrence and Lizzie Fox had been here? They visit frequently. What about Chad Prather, who visits frequently? What about my 83-year-old mom? They were actually going into the room where she typically sleeps. And my mom is currently going through rehab, so she fortunately is not with us. But you see what this could have been. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you as I end this particular episode, I want to encourage you to be strong and courageous. Those are the words of Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous. Those are the words of the Lord to Joshua. It's repeated 3 times in chapter 1, I believe, maybe chapter 1 and chapter 2. Certainly repeated. Be strong and courageous. And I'll add, fear not. The reason that evil has taken hold of our country and that a deep state exists at all is because there weren't enough men and women of courage and conviction to oppose it in the first place. That means that the job is now going to require that much more courage and conviction to root it out. But I believe in my mission. Ladies and gentlemen, I do what I do for a living, not just as a means of supporting my family. Certainly it's, that's a part of it. But it's not the primary reason I do it. I did it for free long before I was ever compensated for it. I do it because it's my life's calling. I do it because it's my vocation. I do it because it's my personal mission in life. I do it because God has pointed me in this direction and said, go. I believe in God. I believe in his call upon my life. I believe that he has a call upon your life too, if you know him and have a relationship with him. And I believe that he would have us stand for our convictions, provided those convictions are rooted in Scripture, that they're real, that they're true. They're not just, some kind of nonsense that's being promoted by the woke mob, say. But they're real convictions, rooted in truth, absolute truth, eternal truth. And men and women who are thus motivated, even just a small number of them, can absolutely change an entire country, an entire culture. And that's what this has to be if we're to win. Because I feel today, I was highly motivated yesterday, but I feel 10 times more motivated as of today. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton.